He did say that.
Yeah, she really did say that
Yeah.
after she just got done Gaddafi and then
Yeah.
laughed about it.
We came, we saw, he died.
We came, we saw, he died. The fact that any human being would ever do that. By the way he died, that's some
2016 election, the Russian intelligence was tapped by the Dutch, and the Dutch reported back to our intelligence. They're baffled because they haven't colluded with Donald Trump, but they have tapped into Hillary Clinton's communications, and she's saying that they have. And they want to know why this is, and they came to the conclusion that she's lying about the Russians because she was trying to protect her own.
Hillary Clinton's downfall isn't just a political misstep, it's almost a Shakespearean comedy written in real time. Joe Rogan and Victor Davis Hanson dissect the myth of inevitability that once surrounded her, laying bare the hubris, the excuses, and the endless cycle of failed reinventions. She wasn't the trailblazing glass ceiling breaker she promised to be, but rather a polished emblem of an elite class that confused entitlement with destiny. From losing what many consider the easiest election in modern history to lingering in the political arena long past her moment, Hillary stands as the ultimate cautionary tale. Ambition without authenticity is destined to implode.
desperate they were to keep Trump out.
Here's the important thing to me. What I learned is that the Russians were successful.
Which is wild.
They would do anything.
I don't think there's any way to read that report and not conclude they accomplished what they set out to do.
They just felt like this is a tool that we have, and let's use it. Let's just say whatever the f we have, say anything.
And to help Donald Trump, and they succeeded.
They repeated that lie. Completely lost respect for Obama when he repeated that lie a few days before the election, knowing it's false.
They had an objective to sow discord and divisiveness within our society at large.
It is a little troubling because if people are fed nonstop propaganda, it is like mass hypnosis.
2016, he and Hillary, she was calling him a Russian agent and he was calling her Crooked Hillary. Everybody thought that given she had destroyed 30,000 emails and the devices upon them and they were under subpoena, that he would have the DOJ go after them. And what did he say? The first thing he said, she suffered enough. People went to him and said, you've got to fire James Comey, the director of the FBI. He said, but he tried.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss the next one. Hillary Clinton's political journey feels less like destiny and more like an overhyped sequel that nobody asked for, yet somehow kept getting funded like a Hollywood franchise gone stale. Joe Rogan and Victor Davis Hanson don't merely poke fun at her legacy. They tear into it with precision, exposing the contradictions, the recycled personas, and that uncanny ability to stumble upward while calling it progress. Once branded as America's answer to an Iron Lady, the inevitable first woman president, the polished juggernaut of politics, Hillary instead morphed into something else entirely. She became the political equivalent of a Windows update, unwanted, unavoidable, and forever promising a fix that somehow manages to break more than it repairs.
2011 thing where Obama allowed people to use propaganda against United States citizens.
Hillary Clinton is and has been an outstanding public servant.
What was done then under Obama, effective repeal of it, was called the Smith Modernization Act.
She was a great Secretary of State for me.
At the time, the media and media control was seen as the linchpin crux of winning the Cold War, piping in pro-U.S. media in.
Joe Rogan, never one to shy away from cutting honesty, highlights the almost theatrical absurdity of Hillary Clinton's public persona. Over the years, she's tried on every costume politics has to offer, casting herself as the fiery progressive, the steady centrist, the warm grandmother with a rehearsed laugh, the feminist crusader, even the relatable woman of the people who famously claimed to carry hot sauce in her purse. Yet none of these roles ever truly landed, because at the center there's no anchor of authenticity. She's the politician who thinks downloading Spotify makes her modern, or that awkwardly dabbing on Ellen will somehow erase memories of her Wall Street speeches. It's the classic trap of image over substance, taking an image consultant's script and wearing it like a new skin, only to discover it amplifies the very thing she was trying to hide, the impression of being robotic, manufactured, and out of touch.
of the election, I think they had some crazy odds of Hillary winning. It was like in the 90%. We watched it from the Comedy Store. We did a podcast from the Comedy Store called the End of the World podcast. What was most fascinating was the podcast was over, and then we all went to the bar, and on the television, Jake Tapper was just seriously bummed out.
Victor Davis Hanson takes the critique a step deeper. To him, Hillary Clinton isn't the tragic victim of circumstance, but the inevitable outcome of entitlement. Her rise was never powered by raw charisma or groundbreaking ideas. It was fueled by proximity to Bill Clinton's magnetism. But when the spotlight turned solely on her, it was like watching a karaoke singer suddenly shoved onto the Grammy stage, unprepared, off-key, and painfully out of sync. The contrast between self-perception and public perception couldn't be sharper. In her mind, she's the wronged stateswoman, the seasoned leader history unfairly denied. Yet, in the eyes of the public, she's the candidate who, despite decades of preparation and institutional backing, couldn't manage to defeat an untested political outsider, not once, but twice.
Denialism unique? No. In 2016, in that interregnum between the election and the December certification, almost nightly, Hollywood actors went on television and they appealed to the electors who were constitutionally bound to reflect the majority vote in their state. They made a direct appeal to be what we call false.
Rogan can't help but laugh at the notion that Hillary Clinton continues to style herself as democracy's last great hope. After all, this is the same figure who went head-to-head with Donald Trump, now sitting in the Oval Office, armed with every conceivable advantage. She had the unwavering support of mainstream media, the glittering endorsement of Hollywood, the backing of Washington's entrenched elite, a former president as her husband, a campaign treasury overflowing with cash, and even the formidable Obama machine working in her favor. And still, she lost. If the survival of democracy truly rests on Hillary Clinton's shoulders, then democracy itself may be facing deeper troubles than anyone dared admit.
Overthrowing a government, installing a friendly one. It's been going on since they could. And back then it was way easier to pull off because there was no internet where you could pull up a Hillary Clinton video from more than a decade ago and go, look at her. She's pretty MAGA. You could put a fucking red hat on that lady and she'd be standing on that stage.
He doesn't just call Hillary out for losing. He goes after the endless excuse-making tour that came in the aftermath. Every defeat is, in her narrative, someone else's fault. One moment, it's Russia meddling in the shadows. The next, it's Facebook algorithms. Then James Comey's timing, Bernie Sanders dividing the base, or good old-fashioned sexism. At one point, she practically blamed the weather. The pattern is unmistakable. Everyone shoulders the blame except Hillary herself. Hanson spotlights this as the defining trait of political aristocracy, an inability to ever accept responsibility. In Hillary's world, she's always the sharpest mind in the room, the seasoned stateswoman too brilliant to fail. So, if voters reject her, the only explanation must be that they were duped, ignorant, or consumed by hate. What never seems to cross her mind is the simplest possibility. Maybe people just find her condescending, disingenuous, and insatiably power-hungry. Joe Rogan seizes on this hypocrisy with his trademark blunt humor. He notes the absurdity of Hillary branding herself as a fearless champion of women, all while smearing her husband's accusers and standing by him through every scandal, a contradiction that leaves Rogan shaking his head and laughing.
Swing states vote to reflect the popular vote. After they failed to do so and Donald Trump was declared the winner, we had major figures on the Democratic side say that he was not legitimately elected. Who were those people? The House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, said he was illegitimate. Hillary Clinton said he was illegitimate. Jimmy Carter said not only was he illegitimate, but he was elected through Russian agency, which was demonstrably proved false by Special Prosecutor Robert.
This is the same Hillary Clinton who champions herself as the great defender of the marginalized, yet simultaneously rubs shoulders with Wall Street bankers and corporate elites at glitzy fundraisers. Joe Rogan finds it almost comical. How can someone jet across the world on private planes to attend climate conferences, only to return and lecture middle-class Americans about the virtues of carpooling to work. The hypocrisy is so blatant it borders on performance art. Victor Davis Hanson peels back the curtain further. To him, Hillary doesn't just embody contradictions, she represents the arrogance of an entrenched political class. She is the living symbol of a ruling elite convinced that leadership is not earned but inherited, a crown passed down by destiny. Her career has never been about bold ideas, transformative policies, or reform. It has always been about the relentless pursuit of power. That's why her positions shift like sand in the wind, why her slogans feel manufactured in committee boardrooms, and why her rallies so often lacked genuine enthusiasm. Hanson paints her as the self-styled queen of a political dynasty, waiting for her coronation, only to discover that the peasants weren't interested in bowing. Rogan sharpens the critique by mocking her carefully choreographed media strategy, the scripted interviews, the cushioned settings, the softball questions. Yet whenever she's thrown into unscripted reality, the mask cracks, the awkward fake laugh, the canned catchphrases, the malfunctioning attempts at humor. It's like watching a robot glitch on stage, equal parts fascinating and unsettling.
You gotta have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked, they're gone. If they've been working and are law-abiding, we should say, here are the conditions for you staying. You have to pay a stiff fine because you came here illegally. You have to pay back taxes, and you have to try to learn English, and you have to wait in line.
Rogan points out that Hillary Clinton doesn't really lose to her opponents. She loses to herself. Time and again, she proves to be her own worst enemy. Every attempt to rebrand, every carefully managed reinvention, only strips away another layer of credibility, making her appear less like a seasoned leader and more like a political shapeshifter, someone with no fixed core, only costumes. Victor Davis Hanson, viewing her through the wider sweep of history, goes even further. He likens her to failed historical figures who confused entitlement with destiny. Hillary seemed to believe her last name, her network of connections, and her resume of titles were enough to guarantee the presidency. But America, for all its flaws and divisions, is not a monarchy. Voters may fight among themselves, but they still recoil from the suffocating stench of entitlement. Hanson argues that her downfall wasn't merely personal, it was symbolic. Hillary's collapse revealed the fragility of the entire political machine propping her up, a system convinced it could manufacture outcomes. In 2016, that illusion was shattered, and she became the unwilling face of its ruin. Rogan, meanwhile, doesn't let go of the comedic absurdity of her lingering presence. Every few months, Hillary resurfaces with a fresh critique, a new complaint, or a carefully crafted hot take. He compares her to that neighbor who won't stop showing up at parties uninvited, reminding everyone she used to live in the biggest house on the block, even though no one is asking for her input. Her commentary often carries the same patronizing refrain, "If only you had listened to me, none of this would have happened." Rogan casts her as politics' most stubborn ghost, haunting America long after her era has passed, unwilling to fade quietly into history.
Hillary would have been a good choice either. She was a terrible choice. She's a corrupt politician, one of the most unlikable people that's ever run for office. They were trying to get people to be supporting her just because she's a woman. This is going to be her history. Women, ladies, I stand with her. So there's all these women that have this blind allegiance towards this career politician, completely full of shit. She's been full of shit.
Hanson argues that Hillary Clinton's greatest weakness wasn't just strategic missteps, it was her complete inability to grasp the cultural moment she was stepping into. She genuinely believed that identity politics, elite endorsements, and glowing media coverage would be enough to pave her path to the presidency. But while she was busy curating a consultant-approved image, she missed the earthquake rumbling beneath her feet, the populist backlash, the fury at entrenched elites, and the raw hunger for authenticity, even if that authenticity came wrapped in chaos. Donald Trump, now seated in the Oval Office, instinctively understood that energy in a way Hillary never could. Hanson doesn't call it brilliance so much as gut-level instinct, but instinct alone was enough to bulldoze her polished, scripted campaign. Joe Rogan circles back to what he sees as the comedy of Hillary's legacy. She remains the only candidate in history to lose to Donald Trump in 2016, and, as Rogan jokes, if she ran again, she'd likely manage to lose to him twice. While the Democratic Party treats her like a seasoned elder, Rogan paints her as political kryptonite. Her very presence deflates enthusiasm, fuels resentment, and makes independents roll their eyes. If Democrats were ever looking for the quickest way to throw another election, putting Hillary back on the ticket would be it.
Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska last week. It was an outreach not to Zelensky or Ukraine or Europe, but to America. They think Donald Trump is a strong leader, but also he is more malleable about seeking a peace settlement rather than whatever it takes attitude of the Biden administration. So he can appeal to Donald Trump to put an end to it on Russian terms. Donald Trump was not the author of the failed reset. Remember the 2009 Geneva debacle where Hillary Clinton pushed that reset button and we were supposed to be friendly with Russia, and basically we said, you should be democratic, you should be democratic. So they were loud but carried a twig rather than spoke softly with a club. And if there is a peace settlement, it will be the work whether the left likes it or not.
Hanson distills the ultimate irony of Hillary Clinton's career. She spent decades meticulously preparing for a presidency that would never come. The donors were lined up, the connections secured, the think tanks churning out policy papers, the resume perfectly stacked, and the political machine fully armed. She believed history itself had reserved her the crown. But instead of coronation, history delivered humiliation. Hanson likens her to the Cleopatra of American politics, clinging to visions of grandeur while the empire she imagined crumbled around her. She stands as a cautionary tale, proof that entitlement without authenticity is not strength, but a slow march to failure. Rogan, with his comedic bluntness, skewers her refusal to fade quietly. Every year or so, Hillary reemerges, hinting at another run, dropping cryptic interviews, launching a podcast, releasing yet another book, or appearing on talk shows to offer unsolicited wisdom. To him, it's like watching an aging rock band that refuses to retire, still touring on nostalgia, still playing the same old songs to smaller and smaller crowds, convinced they're headlining stadiums. But the audience isn't roaring anymore. They're checking their watches, scrolling their phones, wondering why she won't leave the stage. Hanson lands the final strike. Hillary Clinton is more than a failed candidate. She is a monument to the arrogance of an elite class that believed it could bend reality itself to its will and discovered, too late, that it could not.
Watergate to what Hillary Clinton did with Russian collusion, where she actually hired a foreign spy and paid him, which is illegal, to interfere in a campaign, and then had him tap a former campaign aide, Charles Dolan, for fake Russian smears that he got, and then collaborated with Dushenko, and they created this whole file, and then she seeded it among all her contacts in the State Department, people like Victoria Nuland, and then they went into the FBI, who was paying him. It was 10 times bigger than.
She believed destiny itself was on her side. But destiny, as it turned out, had a far different script. Instead of being immortalized as America's first woman president, Hillary Clinton will be remembered as the figure who proved two painful truths: that inevitability in politics is a myth, and that arrogance, no matter how carefully packaged, always comes with an expiration date. The roast leaves her once again, in the same place she so often drifts, lingering at the edges of relevance, insisting that the world would be better if only it had crowned her queen. As America moves forward, Joe Rogan finds humor in her absurd persistence, while Victor Davis Hanson dismantles the aura of entitlement she carried like a royal cloak. Together, they strip away the carefully polished myth of Hillary Clinton, leaving behind little more than the hollow echo of a dynasty that never quite materialized, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest obstacle in politics isn't your rival, it's yourself. Hillary's tragedy lies in her constant miscalculation, mistaking persistence for popularity. She seems to believe that showing up again and again will eventually make people clamor for her return. Instead, Each reappearance acts like a rerun of a TV show nobody asked to see renewed, complete with recycled dialogue about shattered glass ceilings and misunderstood greatness. The problem isn't just that the lines are stale, it's that Hillary isn't evolving. She's replaying the same act, convinced that one more encore will finally deliver a different ending.
And Anderson, it is hard to think of a political comeback that is actually more significant than this one. I'm tempted to say Richard Nixon, but that really falls short of what Donald Trump has achieved.
I think for a lot of people, that was the end of trust in mainstream media. That was the first nail in the coffin. Those to be like, you were so...
Victor Davis Hanson peels back the layers of Hillary Clinton's obsession with being validated by history, exposing a fixation that borders on tragic. For Hillary, losing wasn't simply a political defeat, it was a deeply personal humiliation. She wasn't just running for office, she was running for immortality, a seat in the pantheon of trailblazers. She believed she was entitled to a legacy, that her name was already etched into the marble of history. When voters denied her that coronation, she never truly recovered. Hanson explains that much of Hillary's post-2016 existence has revolved around retrofitting excuses, not just to soothe her own sense of failure, but to reframe the narrative for future historians. Every finger pointed at Russia, Facebook, sexism, or James Comey isn't about clarity, it's about crafting a myth where she was cheated, not defeated. She's trying to write history while still alive, hoping that if she repeats the same story often enough, her failures will eventually be rebranded as misunderstood victories. Joe Rogan, with his trademark bluntness, refuses to let her hide inside that delusion. He points out the uncomfortable truth. No one is clamoring for Hillary's political return except Hillary herself. The Democratic Party props her up occasionally out of habit or symbolism, but even they know she's a liability. For every loyal supporter who offers polite applause, there are 10 times as many groans from voters who see her as yesterday's problem resurfacing again. Rogan calls this the curse of irrelevance, the tragicomic fate of a politician who still acts like the centerpiece of American politics, when in reality she's become the punchline. Hanson lands the final blow. Hillary is living proof that being overprepared doesn't guarantee success. She had decades of preparation, endless resources, and the aura of inevitability. What she lacked was authenticity, and when ambition outruns likability, collapse is inevitable. Instead of being remembered for breaking barriers, Hillary Clinton is remembered for losing the easiest win in modern political history and refusing to fade into the background.